Hello, welcome to Very IT. My name is Prabdeep Singh Mann and I'm the founder and lead instructor at Very IT. Now in this session, we'll be covering three main different topics. Firstly, we'll be creating users using a text file. Secondly, we'll be creating directories using a text file. And lastly, we'll be creating users using a CSV file. Now throughout this session, we'll be covering hands-on practical labs so you can build upon your knowledge, skills and experience. If you do a great favor by hitting that like, subscribe and hitting that bell notification, that'd be greatly appreciated. Many thanks. Here, we'll be creating users using a text file. So to create users from a text file, the first thing we're going to do is navigate to the root of the C drive. So do cd double dot. You may need to do it a few times until you reach the root of the C drive, which I've got already in my case. Now what we're going to do is to create the users in a text file. So the first thing we'll need to do is open up Notepad and we're going to label the respective users. In this example, we're going to have user 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I'm going to save this file as the user.txt file. I'm going to save that in the root of my C drive on a folder called support. Now, upon me doing so, this will now essentially store my file on the root of the C drive on the support folder. To open up the contents of that within PowerShell, we're going to run the following, which is get-content, as this is what will actually recover the contents of a file, and we're going to specify the path. So path, and then we're going to input the file path, which is, we're going to have open quote, C:// apologies, C support /users.user.txt. So if we were to run this now, we're going to find that, yes, in fact, it does open up the contents of that respective text file that we've just created. So now what we need to do is to assign this to an array. So to do that, we're going to create an array under create the $create user, and then we're just going to make that equal the above. So if we were to now in turn run this, it should be assigned to the variable $create user. So let's just confirm that it's a case. So if we do $create user again and run that, we should in fact find that yes, it does recover the contents of that text file we just created. Now the next thing we'll need to do is confirm that this is definitely an array. So in order to confirm that's the case, we will go to $create user, but this time we're going to put a .get type with an open bracket and close bracket. And upon doing that, that will confirm that yes, we are in fact dealing with a system array. Now, as we mentioned before, when we do the $create user, what we found is that it had all the respective 4 separate users, namely user 1, user 2, user 3, and user 4. Now, if we want to recover one of the users, let's say user number 1, it counts from those positions 0, 1, 2, 3. So in order to recover just user 1 from that list, we're going to get our $create user again. However, we will put a hard bracket 0 and a close and another hard bracket closed one. If we run that, that should now in turn, that should now recall the user number 1 in position number 0, as it counts from 0 instead of position 1. So now we're going to get into the root of this, which is how do we actually go about creating the users from the text file. Now in order to do so, we're going to have to essentially run a for each commandlet. So in order to do that, first we're going to use our $create user, which we originally assigned to the get-content with the path of the C support user.txt. Now we're going to use, like we done in our previous sessions, the for each. And for each is similar to an if statement in its format. So we're going to say for each, and then we're going to have the dollar item. Now you can call this whatever you like. I'm going to use the dollar item as that's what I use for the rest of my labs throughout this sessions. So dollar item. So for each item in, and we can say the above, which is the create user, dollar create user. And now, like with any like for each or the if statements, we tend to have a curly bracket, open curly bracket, and a closed curly bracket. And now we're going to set our conditions. Now, when we're creating a for each, we need to have our indentation. So how to go about creating a new user? Well, the first thing we're going to be doing is a new dash local user. We'll then need to specify that the password is going to be $password. The password is going to be the $password. And we'll talk about that in a moment, because we need to specify a few conditions. When we are setting a password, it needs to be a secure string essentially. So we can't just put in any a unsecure string here. And we're also going to specify the name of each of those respective users. We specify the TXT file, and we're going to say it's the dollar item because we're referring to anything within the create user, which is pretty much all those respective users in that TXT file. And we're going to mention that the description is essentially the user. So if we just kind of go a little bit back, which is our password, so we need to set the conditions of that as well. So as mentioned, it's got to essentially be a secure string. It can't be a plain text file, so we have to force it to be that. So what we're going to say is $password, and that equals our convert to secure string. We're going to use IntelliSense to select that. And we're going to say that the string is going to be, and we're going to just set it a generic one throughout for now. So we're going to say it's, we're going to use that open quote as it's a string. And we're going to say, obviously don't store the password in a text file in real life, but we're just doing it for the purpose of this lab to outline how you go about compiling this in a systematical, methodical way. Say PA550RD, for example. And we'll say that it's going to be as plain text. We'll use the force as well. Yeah, and that should essentially be it. So just to summarize, what we've done is we've created an array, create user. That's going to get the contents of the file in the text file, namely the C support users, the TXT, as shown in the bottom right over here with all the user 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's going to look for each item within that create user, and it's going to create new local users based on a password. The password will essentially be in a secure string, and that string will contain the password PA55W0RD, and it'll be in a plain text, and we're just going to force that. We'll say that the names of each of those users are going to be all the respective users in the actual that notepad file where it's got user 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the description of them are going to essentially be user. So now if we were to run this, so I'll highlight the entire script over here, just run that. You can now see, in fact, we do have local users, user 1, 2, 3, 4. They're all enabled, and yes, they do have the description user as well. And that concludes how you go about using the text file to create local users on your device. Here, we'll be creating directories using a text file. So to create directories from a text file, what we'll need to do is to navigate to our notepad, and we're going to create 4 users. Namely, we'll call them A, B, C, and D. User A, user B, user C, user D. Now, upon doing so, we're going to save this into our C support folder, and let's create a folder called support, and I'm going to call it directory.txt. Now that I've done so, I'm now going to start my script whereby we're going to be creating the directories using a text file. So like before, one of the things that we did from earlier is we went to our get dash content, and we specified the path, namely that the path is, I'm going to use a string as that's what you need. So c:\support directory.txt, and we will end it with that quote over there. So if we were just to run this, we can see that yes, when we do open up the C support directory, it does bring the contents of the file that we've just saved, namely user A, B, C, and D. So now what we're going to do is to assign that to an array called directory. So we've got $directory, and we're going to say that that is equal to the above. And if we were to run this one, as expected, if we were now to do $directory, you can now see that the contents of the directory file are now displayed, namely user A, B, C, and D. So the next thing to do is to create our for each. So we're going to do for each, and like before, we've got our $item, and we're going to say that it is in the $directory, namely above. That's what we've just specified. Okay, and like with the if statement, you will have the open curly bracket and the close curly bracket. Now this is where we specify our condition, the put our indentation, and we're going to say that the new dash item is going to be in the path. And we need to specify the actual file path. Say it's c:\. That the name is going to essentially be each of the names in that text file. So it's going to be $item. So it's going to check each of the names within that directory file that we just created. So we're going to have name $item, where our item type is going to be directory. Now if we were to run this, what this is essentially doing is checking each of the items within the text file that we just created, namely user A, B, C, and D. It's going to create new items in that file path under the seed folder, and it's going to look for each of those items in that directory and search for the item type namely directory. And now if we were to actually run this, you can now see it has created the respective directories. And that's how you go about creating directories from a text file. Here, we'll be creating users using a CSV file. So in order to create users from a CSV, we're going to run through a few steps. The first thing we're going to be doing is creating the CSV. We'll then open the CSV just to make sure the contents of it is as expected. And then lastly, we'll be running a for each in order to create the users from the CSV. Now, the steps we'll need to take is firstly creating that CSV file. We don't necessarily need a PowerShell for this part, so we'll just explain how we go about doing this. So once we open up Notepad, we're going to have the respective name, password, and description of the respective users. So as you can see, the column's got name, password, and description, and we're going to have the users respectively, all separated with commas. So there's a user 5, user 6, and user 7 with the respective password 1, 2, 3, and then the departments. Got a bit of space between those ones there. So now what I'm going to do is just save that file as a in my C drive under a folder called support, and I'm going to make sure that it has in the file name the extension has a .csv, and I'm going to save it as a CSV type. So now that I've saved my CSV file, the next step that I'll need to essentially do is to actually open up the CSV file to ensure that it in fact is it does have the contents as it should do. So in order to do that, I'm going to, so I'll just say the first bit, yes, we've created a CSV file and saved it to the C support folder under the file called user list. So call it what you like. I've just called it userlist.csv. So the next bit we'll need to now do is to go over to our get local users just to check what local users we currently have. To actually open up the CSV. Let's just double check what we've currently got before we continue with anything else. So you can see currently we have, as shown in the bottom, the administrator, default, a guest, a Postgres, and a couple of local users under my name and this other one over here. But we don't necessarily have the user 5, 6, and 7 at this stage. So like before, in order to actually open up the contents of that text file or the CSV file in this scenario now, we're going to actually import the CSV. Just make sure that do that. I'm going to do import dash CSV where the path as mentioned is I'm going to put it in a string. So // support / list, like we mentioned above. We've created it under the file name user list. Close our quote over here. Let's make sure that that's the case. So you can see, yes, it does open the contents of that text file, namely user 567 with the respective passwords and department. Now what we're going to do is just to assign that to an array. So in order to do that, we're going to do our dollar. I'm going to call it import user. You can call this array what you like, but I'll just call it import now. And we're going to say that that equals, and we're going to put the above. And now if we were to run this, let's just actually validate that our array is set up. So yes, that is correct. It does show that there. So if we were now to go over to our .get type, just to confirm that we are in fact dealing with an array, you can see, yes, we are dealing with a system array as shown on the bottom over there. So now, as we know, we've got as shown on the bottom, we've got name, password, description. They are our respective columns, and and you've got row 0, 1, and 2 for the users 5, 6, 7 respectively. Now, if we want to actually drill down in terms of specific values within the table, let's say we want to pick the name user 5, what we would do is to get our $import users, but this time round we're going to have our hard bracket 0. Now if we were to do that, that would just essentially bring our first row, so it should bring user 5, password 1, department 1 for the columns name, password, and description respectively. and as expected, that brings the entire row, but we want to be able to bring a value within that row. So in order to do that, what we'll need to do is to put the respective dot and the names of the columns. So we want to have the value for user 5 only, we would end it with a dot name. And if we were to run that, you can see it just brings user 5 as expected. On the other hand, if you want to do it for our password, we would just put the word .password at the end of it. And again, that will bring our password, namely PA55WO0RD number 1. And as expected, that brings that one. And then lastly, if we want to do the same thing, but this time round we want to have the description, then in fact we would add the word description at the end, description, and it should in turn bring the department, namely department 1. So confirm that that is the case. So now what we'll need to do is see if we can get the actual, let's just confirm if these are actually in fact strings now we're dealing with. So what we can do is get all these respective ones over here and paste it below. And what we're going to say now is, like above where we had the get type, we're going to add them with their respective filters here. We're going to add a .get type to each of those. If we were to run this, you can see in fact, yes, they are strings. So if we run the second one for the password one, you can see yes, it's a string, and this one over here as well is a string as expected. So these will be used when we are actually now importing the CSV to create the users. So in order to do that, what we'll need to do is to actually now create our variable over here. So we're going to be doing $import users. We can call it whatever you like, but as I mentioned before, I called them $import users at the time of this. So we're going to be using $import users, and we'll say import CSV user list. So we're just going to copy this one over here, save on time. So import -CSV where the path is a C:\support and it's called userlist.csv. We know that's already the case. And we're going to be using the for each. Like before, it's similar to the if else statement. It will have the open curly bracket and close curly bracket. So we're going to have our $item as before. And we're going to say it's in our $import user. So it's going to be checking all the respective entries in the import, the $import users, which have the respective users, namely number user 5, 6, and 7 as shown at the bottom over there. So now we're going to say $item in, and we're going to be saying that it's import user. Okay, and similar to like how we have on an if else statement, we have the open curly bracket and the close curly bracket. We're going to be setting a couple of conditions. So we're going to say, okay, well, we need to create a new indentation, apologies. We're going to have to create a new -local user. New local user, and that its name going to be looking for all of the respective items, and we're going to be focusing on the name column over here, say dot name, and we're going to be looking at the password. However, if we were to run through those, like before, the passwords need to be a secure string, so we have to do this in a slightly different manner. So what we'll say is The password that we're going to be making reference to is going to have to search for a secure password, and we'll make reference to what that secure password is going to be above here. Continuing on, we'll then make sure that they also have a description, and those descriptions are going to be running through each of those items like before, and they'll be running through these descriptions over here, department 1, 2, and 3. So we'll put a dot description there. So the question is how we're going to actually store the passwords, how we're actually going to retrieve those from the CSV. Well, they need to be in a secure string. So we'll need to ensure that that is equal to convert to your string, where the string is going to essentially be each of those items under the password column. So we're going to do dot password, and like before, we're going to ensure that it is as plain text, and we're going to ensure that we force that. And that should essentially conclude it. So just to summarize, what we've essentially done is we created the users 5, 6, and 7 under a CSV file. We then imported that and ensured that we can open up the files correctly as outlined below over here. We can confirm that yes, they are a string which we've put into a for each argument within here, and we're essentially making reference to the CSV file. It's essentially creating users for each item in this imported CSV file by searching each of the respective names, setting the passwords where those passwords are in a secure string, and we are then also ensuring that the descriptions are updated as per the description column. So if we're to actually run this now, should find, yes, we now have users 5, 6, and 7, and they are all essentially enabled, and that the descriptions are department 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3 as expected. Also, if we were to just finish off by doing get local user, you can now see, yes, we do have those respective local users 5, 6, and 7. And that concludes how you go about creating users from a CSV file. So hopefully you found this session really useful. Just to summarize, we covered 3 main different topics. Firstly, we created users using a text file. Secondly, we created directories with a text file. And lastly, we created users using a CSV file. Throughout this session, we ran through practical hands-on labs so you can build upon your knowledge, skills, and experience. If you can do a great favor by hitting that like, subscribe, and hitting that bell notification, that would be greatly appreciated. Many thanks. Bye for now.